My name is Jennifer, and at 30 years old, my sister demanded $63,000 before Mom's surgery could even begin. She actually smirked, calculator in hand, until the very evidence she meticulously recorded utterly destroyed her life. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you're watching from. My sister, Claudia, who was 6 years older than me, had always been obsessed with money. After I arrived, she became convinced that every dollar spent on me was a direct theft from her future. She kept a notebook which she called the theft log, chronicling every diaper, bottle, and toy, complete with pricing and running totals. She'd sneak into my nursery and murmur, "You're expensive," while calculating the cost of my formula. For my 10th birthday, Claudia handed me a gift in front of our entire family. A printed invoice for all our parents had allegedly spent on me since I was born. The total, $74,958.34. "This is what you owe me," she declared. She then outlined her new method. All expenses had to be matched. If Mom bought me school supplies worth $55, Claudia got $55 cash. If my father paid for my dentist appointment, she received the equivalent in her savings account. She'd even created spreadsheets with 12 years of backdated computations, which our parents owed her. Never mind that they had been spending money on her the entire time. Conveniently, that money didn't count. Our parents tried to argue, but Claudia was ready. She had researched inheritance law and vowed to sue them for financial favoritism. To avoid her meltdowns, they began giving in. For me, every purchase meant writing a check to Claudia. She had a calculator on a chain around her neck and was constantly tallying. Every ordinary childhood event became a business transaction. Our parents even started skipping things I needed simply to avoid double the cost. When I needed braces, they told me no, saying they couldn't afford 2 sets. Even though Claudia didn't need them, my teeth remained misaligned. I learned to decline gifts, skip meals, and wear old clothes to avoid triggering her calculator. Claudia had a meltdown when I started college. The tuition exceeded our parents' ability to pay in cash. She demanded they either give her the equivalent immediately or refuse to pay for my education, as she had no interest in attending college. When they took out loans for me, she demanded matching loans for herself, which she promptly cashed out. She claimed I was taking her future with each semester. I worked 3 jobs to reduce what my parents paid, but Claudia still included room and board, textbooks, and even my toothpaste in what they owed her. Things worsened when Mom became ill. She required costly therapies that insurance only partially paid. I dropped out of school to help with expenses and childcare. But Claudia saw things differently. Every medical bill represented money stolen from her inheritance. She ordered that half of all treatment expenditures be transferred into her account, or she would sue for elder abuse based on financial manipulation. She actually filed paperwork claiming that I was causing our parents to spend their cash on unneeded care, depleting Pauline's potential inheritance. I will never forget the day Mom needed emergency surgery. While my father and I were terrified in the waiting area, Claudia arrived with her calculator and laptop. She had investigated the procedure's expenses and requested a bank transfer of $63,000 for the surgery before Mom went under. She declared, "I'll take a payment plan, but I want post-dated checks today." When I mentioned that her mother might die, she replied it would be cheaper, and she began calculating burial costs versus extended care. Mom survived, but she returned home in need of 24-hour care, which we could not afford. I moved back to assist, but Claudia presented us with an invoice for my free rent, which she requested in cash. She'd emerged with receipts for my shower, water, heat, and Wi-Fi usage. One day, I discovered Mom sobbing about finances. She required medication that we could not afford because we had been paying Claudia matching amounts for all medical expenses. I informed Claudia that her greed was killing Mom. She giggled as she showed me her master spreadsheet. Since we were born, our parents had spent everything on me rather than her. Her calculations indicated that they still owed her $258,753.53. "I'm just taking what's mine," she explained. "You're the thief here." I resolved to put an end to this madness. I gathered all of Claudia's receipts, bank records, and insane spreadsheets from the previous 2 decades. I discovered something she had hidden: unrecorded deposits from our parents, lies about gifts, and years of fraud disguised as fairness. She'd taken far more than I had, but she lied about it. I confronted her with the proof and threatened to expose her to our parents if she didn't stop. Claudia smiled calmly as she pulled out her phone. She showed me a video of Mom's medicine bottles. I stared in horror as she opened each one and poured the pills down the drain. "I did this an hour ago," she said. "Mom's next refill isn't for 2 weeks, and the pharmacy won't fill it early unless you pay full price, which is about $3,000 you don't have." She moved in closer, calculator in hand. "So here's the new deal. You're going to sign this document admitting you owe me everything in my spreadsheets. You'll pay me monthly for the rest of your life, or Mom goes without her heart medication. Your choice." I looked at this sister who had turned love into ledgers and family into transactions. Mom needed the drugs to live. Without them, she could have just days. Claudia brought out the contract, a pen, and her calculator, ready to calculate my first payment. "Sign it," she continued, "or start planning a funeral you can't afford." I looked at the contract, my hands quivering. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Mom's face flashed in my recollection, pale and weak after months of illness. $3,000 for medication, which we did not have because we had been feeding Claudia's greed for years. My phone vibrated. A text from Dad inquiring if I had picked up Mom's medicines yet. He had no idea what Claudia had accomplished. I looked at my sister, who was already calculating interest rates on her calculator, unconcerned by the fact that she had just signed my mother's potential death sentence. I placed the pen down. Claudia's eyes narrowed. I stood up and proceeded into the kitchen, opening each cupboard. Empty medicine bottles lined the shelves like tombstones, containing the heart medicines, blood pressure meds, and anti-clotting agents that protected Mom from suffering another stroke. "It's all gone." Claudia followed me, waving the contract. She had laminated it, of course. Everything in her possession had to be official, documented, filed, and in triplicate. I ignored her and took my car keys. At the pharmacy, I begged. Janet, the pharmacist, was familiar with our family after years of filling Mom's prescriptions. She shook her head sadly as I described the circumstances, excluding the part about my insane sister. The insurance rules were tight. Early refills required full payment, or a police report for stolen drugs, $3,500. I had about $320 in my account. I drove to 3 more pharmacies hoping for different results. Everyone charged the same price and followed the same regulations. One pharmacist suggested going to the emergency department, but it would cost even more, and Mom was too fragile for unnecessary hospital visits. I returned home and found Claudia in Mom's room with her laptop, documenting Mom's medical equipment. She was calculating the resale value with her fingers speeding over the calculator. Mom slept fitfully, unaware that her own daughter was basically preparing her estate sale while she was still alive. I drew Claudia into the hallway. She instantly began recording with her phone, which was another of her techniques. Everything needed to be documented for her hypothetical future lawsuits. I tried arguing first, explaining that without medication, Mom would rapidly degenerate. Hospital expenditures would deplete any bequest more quickly than medication would. Claudia only grinned and showed me another spreadsheet. She had already analyzed the cost difference between prolonged hospitalization and funeral expenses. The funeral was cheaper. Dad returned home from his second job, fatigued and perplexed by the tension. Claudia quickly presented him with an invoice for the day's electrical usage, comparing my percentage to hers. He paid it without hesitation, too exhausted to fight, too worn down by years of her manipulation. I couldn't tell him about the medicine yet. He had a weak heart, and the shock could cause something. Instead, I spent my evening calling every resource I could think of. Medicare would not help with early refills. Prescription assistance schemes required waiting periods. Local charities had reached their capacity. That night, I lay awake calculating my own statistics. Not money, but time. How long could Mom go without her pills? The doctor had been straightforward. Missing even a few days could result in a cardiac crisis. A week would be devastating. By the morning, I had a plan. Not a good one, but better than committing my life to Claudia's craziness. I drove to the bank to apply for a personal loan. When I mentioned medical bills, the banker, who had known our family for years, became alarmed. The application would take many days to process. Mom did not have time. I applied anyhow and then visited 3 other banks. The story was the same everywhere. When I arrived home, Claudia was there with the contract in her hand. She had inserted new clauses. She now wanted compound interest and a portion of any future earnings I might make. Her calculator anticipated payments until I was 80. I discovered Mom straining to breathe, her lips slightly bluish. Without her prescription, fluid had already accumulated in her lungs. I helped her sit up, piled cushions behind her, and opened the windows for fresh air. Claudia watched from the doorway, estimating how much my time was worth at the minimum wage. Mom felt worse the next morning. Her ankles had expanded overnight, which was another indication of heart failure. How does someone transform family into math like this? Claudia's notebook with infant expenditures and muttering, "You're expensive to a baby." I'm curious what makes a 5-year-old start thinking like that. She could barely walk to the restroom. I phoned her doctor, who recommended immediate treatment or hospitalization. When I described our insurance situation, he went silent. He then offered something, the sample closet. Doctors frequently have medicine samples. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it could buy us time. I rushed to the clinic. When I explained, the doctor, who had been treating Mom for years, gave me a gloomy look. He couldn't legally offer me samples for a current patient, but he could teach me about the medication while I was standing near his sample cupboard. I left with a week's supply of drugs tucked among instructional leaflets. Mom's color improved within hours of receiving her first dose. She could breathe easier. The edema began to subside. But 1 week wasn't enough. I needed an actual solution. I started selling goods like my laptop, phone, and college textbooks that were accumulating dust. Each sale felt like accepting defeat, but Mom needed the medications. Claudia unsurprisingly took note. She requested receipts, reasoning that any money I generated should be split with her because I was living in her home. The pawn store handed me $500 for my grandmother's ring, which was the only thing I kept from her inheritance. Claudia had obtained the rest. Naturally, after submitting invoices proving that Grandma had spent $15 more on my birthday gifts throughout the years, I raised another $1,000 through odd jobs, plasma donations, and pestering friends for loans. Still short, Mom was nearing the end of her sample week. That's when I recalled Claudia's evidentiary films. She videotaped everything and saved it all on her laptop. Years of family memories were transformed into financial documents. But what more might be there? While Claudia was attending her weekly accountant meeting, I sneaked into her room. Claudia's laptop was password protected, yet she acted predictably. The password was her favorite number, the amount she claimed our parents owed her. Her files were well arranged with folders within folders, each labeled with dates and monetary amounts. I discovered the recordings she'd made of damaging Mom's medication, multiple perspectives time-stamped, and with her narration detailing her leverage technique. But I discovered more. Years of recordings in which she admits to lying about expenses, inflating costs, concealing gifts from our parents, and laughing about manipulating Dad's guilt and Mom's illness. She had chronicled her own deception, too arrogant to recognize that she had manufactured evidence against herself. I transferred everything to a drive. Then I discovered something else. Her original bank statements, not the modified versions she handed our parents. Deposits they had made that she'd never disclosed. Gifts from relatives she claimed never arrived. And investment accounts under her name, funded by money she'd stolen from our parents over the years. The front door opened. Claudia arrived home early. I closed the laptop and slid out through the window. My pulse raced when I heard her footsteps in the corridor. The drive burned in my pocket like proof of my own wrongdoing. Yet, it was nothing compared to what she had done. Claudia handed me a new contract that evening. This one had a clause stating that I would give up any claim to inheritance in exchange for monthly payments that were geared for inflation. She had evaluated my entire life's earning potential and wanted 50%. I pretended to think about it while Mom napped in her chair, breathing laboriously despite the samples. 3 days of medicine remained. The pharmacist had contacted twice regarding the pending refills. $3,500 could as well have been $3 million. Claudia took out her phone and showed me additional videos. This time she had videotaped herself at the drugstore, guaranteeing that they would not refill early. She had actually gone to make sure I couldn't work around her idea. Her wickedness was breathtakingly thorough. Dad walked in when Claudia was explaining the interest calculations. He stared between us, puzzled by the tension. Claudia quickly went into victim mode, alleging I was attempting to take her due fortune by pushing unneeded medical bills. I saw Dad's face crumple. He'd worked 2 jobs for 30 years and saved every penny, but it wasn't enough to support one daughter or save his wife. The weight of failure strained his shoulders. That night, I made a decision. Claudia had transformed our family into a business. Perhaps it was time I learned her language. I spent the next morning in the library learning everything I could on financial fraud and elder abuse. The facts on my drive provided a clear picture, but I needed to learn how to apply it successfully. Claudia had several years of expertise manipulating our parents. I had many days to learn how to fight back. The librarian, an elderly woman who had assisted me with school projects years prior, saw my stack of legal volumes. She brought me coffee and gave me a concerned look. I said that I was helping a friend with a family crisis. She nodded knowingly and directed me to materials on financial exploitation inside families. When I returned home, I saw Claudia had installed a lock on the medicine cabinet. She'd also installed security cameras in the kitchen and living room, all linked to her phone. She was documenting everything, arguing that I was the true threat to our parents' finances. Mom's breathing became more heavy over the hour. The sample drugs were helpful but not sufficient. She needed her entire prescription regimen. I assisted her onto the couch, adjusting pillows to improve her breathing. Claudia appeared with her calculator, calculating the expense of my care at professional rates. I decided to try something out. While Claudia watched, I took out my wallet and gave Dad $40. I informed him it was for food. Claudia's fingers rushed over the calculator. She requested the matching $40 immediately. Dad, tired and perplexed, groped for his wallet. I stopped him and showed Claudia the supermarket receipt from my wallet. The $40 was reimbursement for groceries I had already purchased. According to her own guidelines, this was not new money spent on me. It was payback. Claudia's face turned red. She had not anticipated me to begin documenting like her. She spent the next hour establishing new subcategories in her spreadsheet for reimbursements and direct expenditures. I took advantage of the opportunity to visit my father's home office and review old bank statements. If Claudia could make a case using numbers, so could I. The statements revealed something intriguing. Claudia persuaded our parents 5 years ago to enlist her as a joint account holder for emergency considerations. Since then, regular payments have been leaving their account, always just below the threshold that would activate banking notifications. They probably didn't notice the small, persistent bleeds. I photographed everything using an old digital camera I found in the closet. Claudia had access to my phone via family sharing. She couldn't locate this camera. Mom's condition worsened that afternoon. Even though she was sitting upright, her lips became blue. Her fingertips swelled. I recognized the symptoms of fluid retention that the doctor had warned me. Without the diuretics, her body was drowning from within. I contacted the doctor again. He couldn't prescribe new samples right away, but he did add that the hospital pharmacy occasionally offered patient aid programs. They might be able to assist if Mom was admitted, but admission entailed tests, examinations, and expenditures that would set Claudia's calculator off. Claudia must have been keeping track of my calls. She appeared in the doorway holding printed hospital admission estimates. A cardiac evaluation costs a minimum of $25,000. She wanted her half up front, or she'd accuse me of pushing unneeded treatments on her mother. I made a decision that felt like betrayal, but it could save Mom's life. I agreed to Claudia's most recent contract with one adjustment. Instead of making lifetime payments, I would give her a lump sum from the sale of everything I owned. She immediately calculated and agreed, dispelling mistrust. My car, leftover jewelry, electronics, and even my clothing were valuable. She estimated a total of $18,000. She agreed and took out her phone to document the deal. I signed her contract and she quickly started scheduling times to inventory my belongings. What she didn't realize was that I had previously sold the most valuable items for Mom's medication. She figured $18,000 based on products that no longer existed. Claudia celebrated her victory by updating spreadsheets and calculating interest. I assisted Mom in getting to her car. I told Claudia I was bringing Mom for some fresh air. She was too preoccupied calculating her windfall to pay attention. At the hospital, I explained our insurance situation to the intake nurse. She assessed Mom's blue lips and swollen ankles and classified the admission as an emergency cardiac examination. The billing department might handle the money later. Mom needs aid right now. The physicians verified my fears. Without medication, Mom's heart was failing. They started giving her furosemide diuretics right away, and the edema started to go down within hours. Her breathing relaxed. Her face regained its color. The hospital's patient advocate indicated that they had pharmaceutical assistance programs, but the paperwork would take several days. I stayed with Mom all night, clutching her hand as she slept. Hospital monitors beeped steadily, confirming that her heart was still struggling. Around dawn, my phone exploded with Claudia's messages. She had detected my deceit about the possessions and was calculating fines and interest for my breach of contract. She arrived at the hospital with her laptop and portable printer, prepared to provide me with new documents. But she made an error. In her wrath over my lie, she brought the incorrect folder. Instead of her new contracts, she grabbed her evidence folder, which had footage showing her smashing her mother's medication. I saw a chance. While Claudia was setting up her mobile office in the waiting area, I queried a passing nurse about hospital security. I explained that my sister had footage on her laptop of trashing patient medication. The nurse's countenance tightened. She called both security and the patient advocate. Claudia was deep in computations when hospital security arrived. They wanted to speak with her about the medicine incident. She chuckled, assuming I was making up stuff. Then she opened her laptop and showed them the evidence of my financial crimes. Instead, her neatly ordered folders displayed on the screen, one of which was named Medication Leverage. The security guard urged her to access it. Claudia, still certain of her virtue, clicked the folder. Her own films played, showing her throwing drugs down the sink and discussing how she planned to exploit her mother's health as leverage. The security supervisor promptly contacted the hospital's administrator and social services. Claudia attempted to close the laptop, but the harm had been done. The patient advocate had seen enough. She stated that destroying prescription medication constituted a severe kind of elder abuse. The hospital would file reports with the appropriate agencies. Claudia's face turned white when she realized her meticulous record had become evidence against her. While Claudia handled security, I visited with the financial consultant. The hospital had emergency funding for situations like ours in which family members were financially exploited. They might provide emergency care for Mom while also assisting us in applying for long-term aid. The counselor stated that given proof of financial abuse, we might be eligible for expedited processing. I handed over the drive with Claudia's financial details. The counselor's eyes widened as she studied years of concealed transfers, inflated expenses, and recorded admissions to fraud. This was sufficient to demonstrate a pattern of exploitation. Dad came to the hospital puzzled and scared. Claudia had contacted him, stating that I had kidnapped Mom and was forcing her to undergo unnecessary medical procedures. He saw Mom sitting up in bed, breathing normally for the first time in days and with color in her cheeks. The disparity between Claudia's statements and reality finally woke him up. I showed him the bank statements that I had found. His palm shook as he identified a hitherto unknown transfer pattern. 20 here, 50 there, and sometimes hundreds, all transferred from their joint account to Claudia's personal account. Over 5 years, she had pocketed approximately $32,000 more than they had given her directly. The hospital social worker joined us and explained the situation. They were compelled to report elder abuse based on camera evidence and financial records. Claudia would likely face an investigation, but more significantly, they might assist us in protecting Mom and Dad's remaining assets from future exploitation. Claudia came into the room, calculator in hand, demanding to know who would pay half of her hospital fees. The social worker informed her calmly that she was no longer permitted to have unsupervised contact with her parents. Security led her out as she yelled about contracts and ownership. Mom's condition improved significantly over the next few days. Her heart stabilized after receiving the right medication. The swelling receded. She could walk without gasping for air. The hospital's aid program met her urgent needs while we worked on longer-term solutions. Dad appeared to have aged years in those days. Realizing how naive he had been to Claudia's manipulation, he began the arduous process of removing her from bank accounts and changing passwords. When the bank became aware of the elder abuse report, it assisted him in recovering some recent transfers and establishing safeguards against future exploitation. I obtained a part-time job at the hospital gift shop to supplement my income while caring for Mom. It did not pay well, but every dollar helped. Without Claudia's continual demands for matching cash, our parents' small income was sufficient to meet their necessities. Claudia attempted everything to regain control. She sent invoices for emotional distress caused by her exclusion from the hospital. She calculated the worth of her time spent researching my scam. She also attempted to bill our parents for the gas she wasted traveling to the hospital. Each paper she sent provided additional evidence of her fixation. The investigation progressed slowly but steadily. Investigators discovered patterns dating back years. Claudia claimed dependent status on our parents for tax purposes while receiving thousands in undocumented remittances. She'd open credit cards in their names and max them out, leaving our parents liable for the bill. Mom got stronger every day. We developed new routines, morning meds, afternoon walks, and nighttime activities to strengthen her heart without the added stress of Claudia's frequent computations. Mom smiled more. She began talking about the future rather than simply surviving each day. One morning, I discovered Dad in his office surrounded by boxes of receipts and statements. He was trying to figure out just how much Claudia had taken throughout the years. I carefully removed the calculator from his grasp. We didn't have to play Claudia's game anymore. The investigators would handle the numbers. We needed to focus on healing. Claudia's accountant, whom she had met with weekly, called us. He'd been increasingly concerned about inconsistencies in her reporting. When he found out about the investigation, he revealed paperwork proving Claudia had been concealing possessions and income while claiming poverty to our parents. The extent of her lies was astounding. The hospital released Mom with a steady medication regimen and follow-up appointments. The assistance programs paid for her prescriptions for the next 6 months while we worked on permanent solutions. Home was odd without Claudia's continual presence and calculations. I transformed Claudia's old room into a recuperation area for Mom. We removed the lock she had installed, the concealed cameras, and the dozens of calculators she had left behind. In their place, we added comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and family photos from before everything became a transaction. Dad began attending a support group for families affected by financial exploitation. He realized he wasn't alone. Many families shared similar stories about adult children who used love as leverage. The group helped him realize that giving in to Claudia had not been love. It had enabled her obsession. Claudia made one final attempt to reclaim control. She arrived at the house with a new contract, this time promising to waive our debts to her in exchange for regaining access to our parents' finances. She calculated the worth of her forgiveness to be exactly the amount in their retirement savings. Dad greeted her at the door. For the first time in years, he did not take out his wallet. He merely informed her that love could not be calculated. Family was not a business, and she needed help with her addiction. He offered to pay for therapy if she agreed to it. She laughed and waved her calculator, but Dad silently shut the door. Through the window, I saw Claudia standing on the porch, feverishly calculating on her phone. She appeared smaller, deflated without an audience for her spreadsheets. She eventually left, but not before slipping a final invoice under the door for the emotional effort of the visit. Claudia was ordered to pay restitution for the drugs she destroyed and the money she fraudulently obtained. She was also forbidden from having financial dealings with our parents. The legal ramifications were less significant than the family ones. She had betrayed a trust that could not be assessed or returned. Mom continued to recover. Her heart grew stronger after being released from the stress of constant financial depletion. She resumed gardening, which she had abandoned when Claudia's calculator triggered with each seed packet. Dad retired early to spend more time with her, finally reaping the benefits of decades of hard labor. I returned to school part-time to study healthcare administration. My experience navigating Mom's care and hospital aid programs motivated me to assist other families facing similar issues. The financial aid staff assisted me in locating grants and scholarships that did not demand matching payments from anyone. Claudia sent out periodic texts, always with computations attached. She'd calculate the cost of missed birthdays, family events she wasn't invited to, and the monetary value of relationships she'd shattered. We stopped opening them. Some things couldn't be quantified, no matter how many decimal places she used. The investigation's results provided us leverage, but Claudia wasn't done. She began popping up at weird hours, experimenting with new strategies. One morning, I saw her preparing to tamper with the lock on Dad's car while holding a calculator, ready to calculate the depreciation value she claimed we owed her for emotional vehicle damage. I documented everything with an old camera, creating our own evidence file. Claudia's despair became more obvious every day. She'd lost her principal source of income, and her obsession could only focus on increasingly odd calculations. The bank assisted us in discovering more concealed accounts. Claudia had been siphoning money for more than 10 years, not just 5. The amount had exceeded $65,000, but recovering it would take time. Each revelation seemed like peeling away layers of lies. Mom's healing remained steady. The hospital's medicine program changed to a permanent help plan. She could garden for hours, her breathing calm and assured. Dad made raised beds so she wouldn't have to bend so much, a simple move that would have previously triggered Claudia's calculator. I discovered additional evidence while cleaning out old boxes. Claudia had been deceiving our parents since high school, fabricating school costs and pocketing the proceeds. She manipulated report cards to indicate fee-based activities and permission slips for excursions that never occurred. The paper trail dated back 20 years. Claudia escalated her efforts to reclaim control. Claudia's own folders were used as evidence against her, which is amazing. She meticulously ordered everything, effectively building the case herself. I'm trying to figure out what goes through someone's mind when they label a folder medication leverage and assume it's standard behavior. She filed complaints with Adult Protective Services saying that I was isolating our parents. The inspector who arrived to investigate discovered Mom teaching me her pie recipe as Dad repaired the kitchen sink. There were hardly any signs of seclusion or abuse. The investigator actually assisted us in filing further protections. With Claudia's documented habit of false reports, we could seek restraining orders. Not a full restraining order, but sufficient to prevent her persistent pestering. Claudia's next move stunned us. She contacted distant relatives telling stories about being cut off from her dying mother. I am confident she calculated the emotional manipulation value of each call. These relatives, however, were familiar with our family. They'd observed Claudia's obsession build over time. Most simply stopped answering her calls. One relative paid a visit, anxious about the family drama. He discovered Mom healthier than she had been in years, and Dad calm and smiling. We showed him some of Claudia's invoices and spreadsheets. He walked away shaking his head, grumbling about getting his own finances checked after seeing what relatives could do. The restitution hearing started. Claudia arrived with boxes of her own documents ready to demonstrate that every penny was justified. However, her own thorough records worked against her. Every video spreadsheet and calculated manipulation became evidence of financial misconduct. She attempted to represent herself, estimating the savings and legal bills. The judge carefully emphasized that destroying medication and extorting family members are not typical financial transactions. Claudia actually used her calculator to refute this, calculating the market worth of leverage. The courtroom fell silent as she tried to assign a dollar value to her mother's suffering. Claudia was ordered to reimburse $20,000 for the stolen funds she could prove, as well as the cost of her mother's ruined prescriptions. Payment schedules were set up based on her actual income, not her exaggerated expectations of what she deserved. Her response was predictable. She sent invoices for the cost of going to court, the value of her time spent on reparation paperwork, and even the emotional toll of being held responsible. We filed them alongside all her other documents, proof that her obsession had not changed. Mom's health remained stable. She enrolled in a cardiac rehabilitation program to strengthen her heart with careful exercise. Dad drove her to each session, finally able to support his wife without matching payments to anyone. I continued to work at the hospital gift shop while attending school. The flexible schedule allowed me to assist with Mom's appointments and Dad's transition to retirement. Our income was small but adequate without Claudia's relentless drain. Claudia attempted one final significant manipulation. She showed up claiming to be pregnant and calculated how much child support our parents would owe as grandparents. She had spreadsheets with projected costs for college and emotional upkeep. But she made a mistake. Her own documents revealed that she had been claiming infertility for insurance benefits. Add another fraud to the list? The authorities widened their inquiry in light of this new evidence. Insurance fraud carries serious sanctions. Claudia's meticulous recording of her fraudulent claims made prosecution simple. She had once again calculated herself into a corner. During this time, we rediscovered our family bond. Dad rediscovered woodworking, producing furniture without regard for matching cash. Mom taught me her mother's recipes and shared stories unrelated to money. We played board games that did not include calculators. Claudia's final court appearance ended in probation and mandatory rehabilitation for her financial obsession. The judge ordered her to attend therapy, developed expressly for people who had turned their relationships into business. She attempted to negotiate a lower sentence based on the cost of therapy, but the court was not interested in her figures. The restitution money began to arrive monthly. Small sums, yet symbolic of accountability. We put them directly toward Mom's medical expenses. Money finally moving in the right direction. I completed my healthcare administration degree. The hospital offered me a full-time role guiding families through financial aid programs. My experience with Mom's care and Claudia's exploitation fueled my desire to safeguard vulnerable people from financial abuse. Dad sold a few of his carpentry projects at local craft fairs. Not a lot of money, but enough to cover materials and enjoy dates with Mom. They would go to matinee movies and share popcorn. Simple pleasures felt luxurious after years of deprivation. After years of deliberate austerity, Claudia delivered a final message on her collection day, which coincided with the anniversary of the first invoice she'd ever handed me as a child. She computed the overall value of our relationship, $63,000 according to her math. We did not respond. Mom celebrated 1 year of medication stability with a small party for close family and friends. Nothing that would prompt calculations. She baked her own cake, nurtured her growing garden, and danced with Dad in the kitchen. Her heart beat in a steady, calm rhythm. The house felt lighter, free from the weight of constant financial monitoring. We had removed all of Claudia's covert cameras, locks, and tracking devices. In their place were family photos from before. Money became more important than people. I wondered if Claudia's therapy was working, if she was learning to see relationships as more than transactions. But I couldn't think about it too long. We needed to focus on our own rehabilitation and rebuilding our lives. Dad framed Claudia's first theft record entry from when I was born, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far we had come. He wrote below it, "Love is not a transaction." Claudia was barred from having any financial dealings with our parents after the investigation officially concluded. She couldn't access their accounts, request matching contributions, or determine their value. The judicial system had finally imposed limits on her obsession. Mom returned to volunteering at the library, which she had stopped when every hour had a calculated value. She assisted senior patrons in finding large print books and taught basic computer skills. The librarian who helped me research financial abuse became a personal friend. Our new normal set in gradually. Breakfast without bills, shopping without mathematics, and family meals where the only numbers discussed were recipe quantities. We had learned to be family again, imperfect, but real. Claudia paid her first restitution check without including an invoice. We knew something had shifted. Just a check. No calculations, no credit demands. Perhaps therapy was finally working. Mom's garden flourished that summer. She shared vegetables with neighbors without keeping a ledger of who owed what. Dad built her a small greenhouse so she could garden all year. I helped them can tomatoes for the winter, filling the cupboards with jars, each one a symbol of freedom from Claudia's calculations. Looking back, Claudia's obsession almost wrecked us. But we'd survived by refusing to accept her assessment of our value. Love could not be invoiced. Family was not a business, and some debts could never be repaid, no matter how many decimal places she added. Mom's heart medication now arrived monthly thanks to the assistance programs I helped her apply for. Each delivery symbolized independence from Claudia's manipulation. Dad marked them on a calendar not to track costs, but to celebrate another month of Mom's health. We had learned to protect ourselves through documentation and boundaries, but more importantly, we had learned to cherish what could not be quantified. Mom laughed at Dad's jokes. Tomatoes ripened in the sunlight. Quiet evenings passed without the sound of calculator keys. The family photos were placed back on the walls, not the ones Claudia had documented for their frame values, but those that captured real moments. Birthday celebrations came before invoicing. Holidays came before spreadsheets. A time when love was assumed rather than audited. I continued to work at the hospital, assisting other families in navigating financial crisis while maintaining their dignity. Each time I helped someone avoid exploitation, I remembered Mom's bluish lips and those empty medicine bottles. Never again. Claudia stayed on the outside of our lives, separated by legal boundaries and hard-earned wisdom. Her restitution payments persisted, modest acknowledgments of the harm she had caused. We used them to help Mom, transforming her cruelty into care. Dad's garden beds became Mom's sanctuary. She grew flowers among the vegetables, adding beauty without needing justification. Sometimes I'd find her sitting among the plants, breathing easily, her heart steady, finally free. Our story was not unusual. The support group Dad attended was full of similar stories. Families torn apart by financial obsession, but slowly healing. There were stories of betrayal, but also of boundaries, recovery, and resilience. Mom celebrated her 75th birthday with a modest gathering. No invoices, no contracts, just laughter and cake. Dad gave her a handmade jewelry box. I gave her a photo album of her garden through the seasons. Simple gifts reflecting love, not value. Financial recovery took time, but emotional recovery took longer. Trust, once fractured by deliberate betrayal, was slowly rebuilt. We learned to give without fear, to receive without suspicion, and to live without keeping score. Claudia's court-mandated therapy continued, and perhaps it was finally working. Her last text arrived months later. No numbers, no calculations, just 6 words. I'm learning to see things differently. We chose cautious hope, not reconciliation, not yet. But the belief that even the most calculated hearts can one day learn to love without keeping score. Mom's heartbeat remained strong. The garden bloomed. The calculators were gone. And for the first time in years, our home was filled not with numbers, but with peace.